This video is a bike packing trip I took in July of 2022. I had just purchased a used but still almost brand new Specialized rock hopper bike that I was going to use for bike packing. And so I had ridden the bike about 150 miles prior to the trip, kind of made some adjustments to it, and then I loaded the additional 70 pounds of gear on it for about a 3-day bike packing trip. My plan was to go to the Waterloo Cedar Falls area where both my daughters live. That way I would be relatively close if there would ever be a malfunction with the bike or if there'd be any kind of emergency. Where I live, I wasn't real close to the Cedar Valley Nature Trail that I was going to ride on. And so from my house just to the trail is about a 21 to 22 mile trek to get there. And so on my way out, I had traveled through the communities in the school district that I teach in. And so went through Troy Mills, went through Walker, and then ended up riding some gravel roads as I made my way to Brandon, Iowa, where I eventually met up with the Cedar Valley Nature Trail that would take me the rest of the way to Evansdale, Iowa. The route that I had planned worked out pretty well. I've been riding a lot of gravel roads for the last few years just because that's what's around me living out in rural Iowa. And so the wider tires on a mountain bike work really well. And so I was able to handle staying off the main roads as much as I could and riding on the gravel to make my connections. The day I left for my trip, I couldn't have asked for nicer weather. Yeah, it was a typical hot July day, but there was absolutely no wind at all, which made it great. Already having the extra 70 pounds on my bike, the last thing I needed to have was a heavy, strong headwind to slow me down. Brandon was the halfway point of my trip, and so I left the gravel roads and 2-lane highways behind me and was able to get on the Cedar Valley Nature Trail from here to the rest of my journey. Brandon is home of Iowa's largest frying pan, so I wanted to stop and get a picture of that. But I also passed what looked to be a very sketchy looking pop machine, but I was so tickled when that Diet Pepsi came rolling out. That cold pop felt pretty good on a 90+ degree day. On a warm day like this, I tend not to eat a big meal. Instead, I just kind of snack or graze all day long while I'm riding the trail. And of course, anybody who knows me knows I'm also into model railroading. And so when I see things like grain elevators that once served this rail trail of the Waterloo, Cedar Falls, and Northern, I tend to take pictures or capture those, knowing that pretty soon those things will sooner or later be gone. So old grain elevators or the abandoned rock quarry that still has its cement silos, I find very unique and interesting because they are definitely a gateway to the past. Now, it's not uncommon on my rides to see turkey or deer or pheasant or that, but this one kind of startled me because, cows, they can be pretty docile and tame and go their own way, but I was also hoping it wasn't a bull that I was going to have to turn around and pedal my little tail off to try to outrun it. traveling on the trail when I did, It was pretty light that day. I'd pass every once in a while a bicyclist or two. If I stopped at a rest area and saw a bicyclist, they were always very curious when they see my bike fully loaded on, am I doing RAGBRAI, or what am I out doing by myself with that much gear? And so when you tell them, oh, I'm out bike packing, I'm going to camp, I'm going to eat, I've got everything I need on my bike, they kind of look at you are like, that's a thing? You're doing this for fun? But it is growing in popularity, and yeah, it is a thing, and it's really pretty fun. There are still 4 depots that remain along the Cedar Valley Nature Trail. Center Point has one, Brandon has one, LaPorte City has one, and Gilbertville has one. The Brandon is a private owned that has a business out of it. The LaPorte City Depot is been converted into a house, but the Center Point and the Gilbertville Depot have been restored for trail use. They have some railroad artifacts in there, a great place to get water for the trail, and of course having bathroom facilities in that. And so the people who have restored the Gilbertville Depot have really done a nice job, and it's very welcoming for trail users. So crossing this bridge over the Cedar River was kind of like the finish line, because technically it is the end of the Cedar Valley Nature Trail, but there are other trails that pick up in the Evansdale, Waterloo, Cedar Falls area to get you around. And so going across this bridge was like, yay, I'm done with the Cedar Valley Nature Trail. But then I got on some of the bike routes throughout the town of Evansdale to get me to my campground where I would be staying. Once I got to my campsite, it was time to start setting things up. Set up my tent, laid out my air mattress, got my sleeping bag, got everything I would need kind of laid out and organized for the next 3 days. Talked to the camp director about purchasing some firewood. He said, hey, for $5 you can get 30 pieces of wood. I knew that would last me the 3 days. Later on that evening, my oldest daughter and their partner came out and brought meatless hot dogs and shish kebabs for themselves, while I made myself some chicken Alfredo, and we had just a nice visit. Really brought the first day of bike packing to a nice end. The next day of my trip wasn't going to be so much about bike riding. My youngest daughter and I were going to spend the day at Lost Island Water Park. So I got up that morning, had some oatmeal, quickly packed a few things I needed on my bike for the day. As I rode the trail, I ran across an old railroad RPO car and boxcar. And I have to say, this trail intersected with another concrete trail on East Challis, which will take you to the theme park there that you see. But if you turn right and go across East Challis, it'll hopefully continue the trail into Lost Island Water Park, where I'm headed right now to meet my youngest daughter. And there's her red bug. And we were ready to spend our day at the water park. So we pretty much closed the water park down, staying there for the full 8 hours of the day. I unlocked my bike and I was getting ready to ride back to the campground. And my youngest daughter said, well, Dad, what are you doing for supper? I said, oh, I was going to have chili. And she said, well, how about we bring out some hot dogs and that? And I said, wonderful. I said, we could even have chili dogs. I was a little surprised on my ride back to my campsite because this tree was not down on the trail on my way to the water park that morning. So I had to get off my bike, lift my bike up over the tree, and then could continue on my way. So while hot dogs were being cooked over the fire, I was getting chili ready, and that way we could have some chili dogs if anybody wanted them. And that ended the second day of my adventure. Loved the campground, but every morning it was a little bit of a distance to the men's shower house, but I did enjoy charging up my power banks while I shaved and showered and used the facilities every morning. Had a little critter in my shoe one morning and had a beautiful view of the Cedar River just short of my campsite. On this third day, my wife and I were spending the day with our youngest daughter at Lost Island Theme Park. My youngest daughter took a summer job there, and I had never been to a brand new theme park that just opened, but this one has. And yeah, there are a few things that still are not operable, or maybe some landscaping things that are not done. But everything is new, it was clean, and it was just a really nice experience. And so we would go back again in a heartbeat. My wife and daughter Claire decided to stay for dinner, and so they had hot dogs and chips, and we did some s'mores by the fire. And to wind down the evening, I pulled out my railroad history book that I brought and did a little reading. The next day it was time to get packed up again, so I took my bags out of the tent and slowly laid everything on the picnic table to pack up to get ready to go home. I was a little concerned when I woke up that morning because it was extremely windy, but the way I figured the wind would be at my back the majority of the day, which it was, which made the trip pretty pleasant. So I headed over the Cedar River once again at Evansdale. Now the Cedar River takes a nice bend here. So right now it's going to be to the left of me, but pretty soon I'll cross over it again south of LaPorte and it'll be on the right side of me. And so I'm headed south with the wind at my back, giving me a nice tailwind for the majority of my ride. Since I had checked out the majority of the Gilbertville depot on my way up the first day of my trip, this was just basically a restroom, get a snack, and fill up my water bottles, stop, and then I was on my way again. Here's where I'll cross the Cedar River again. The river goes from my left now to my right and will be on the right side of me for the remainder of the ride. This portion of the trail is still crushed limestone, and it was kind of funny. The day I got home from my trip, the Cedar Rapids Gazette had run an article that $3.5 million have been allotted to pave this one portion of the trail that is not paved yet. And so then the full 52 miles of trail will all be concrete or asphalt of some type. As I came back into Brandon, I was making the decision, do I continue on the trail to Center Point, which I also had a route planned to get me home, or did I want to break off the trail and go back on the 2-lane highways and gravel roads to get me home? And I decided that wind to my back was feeling pretty good, pushing me along, that I was going to stay on the trail for this portion of the ride. Once again, it was going to be kind of a snack lunch with some ham salad and crackers, some whole cashews, and then of course that sketchy pop machine that had the cold Diet Pepsi. Yeah, I made sure to stop by and get another can of that. Just as you leave Brandon, there's a really nice arch bridge. You can't tell it as I'm riding over it, but if you could see it from the side, it has some really neat arches with a creek that runs underneath. Another neat looking grain elevator that once served the WCF&N Railroad along this line. By this time of the day, it was getting pretty warm, so I was taking any advantage of where there would be a spot to stop for some shade, fill up my water bottles, and just take a break. I was on no schedule to get home, but I wanted to make sure I was keeping myself safe. This portion of the trail had been closed for some time while they were doing some resurfacing, doing some bridge repairs, and also taking care of some drainage issues underneath the I-380 interstate. But I think it's all worth it. It was very nice riding. Coming into Center Point, this was going to be my last stop to get water, use the restroom, and then it was going to be about a 21-mile ride on both gravel and two-lane roads to get back home. And just like the Gilbertville Depot, this one has been restored with their museum open on Sundays from 2 to 4. I'm going to guess there was about a mile to a mile and a half that I never pedaled on Paris Road in northern Lynn County. This is a nice seal-coated road that has some gradual hills that you can just coast down, but it gives you enough speed that you can pedal up just a little bit to go right down the next hill again without pedaling. It was a wonderful way to end a long journey by just coasting some of the trip. And by this point in my trip, I was getting anxious to get home. This is part of my daily 20-mile ride that I do, so I knew I was within distance of being home. It was a great trip, and I look forward to doing another one very soon.